And it'll automatically go live for me as well.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
We're now live. So, welcome everybody to another evening of the Metabolic Monday. I always want to go Manic Monday, but that's just me and the Bangles, I think. Tonight's special guest, we've got the lovely Lydia with us anyhow. Al may be here, maybe not. He's got a bit of an issue on something that he's dealing with at the moment. But our special guest tonight is Patrick Coles. Patrick, welcome to Metabolic Monday.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. It's great to be here. And nice to meet you, Lydia.
And you,
Would you
Patrick?
just like to? Oh, sorry, Lydia.
That's all right.
Would you, Patrick, just like to introduce yourself, give us a bit about your background, and we can then go into the subject matter that you're going to bring to the table?
Yeah, so I am a carnivore. I've been carnivore for 20 months now. Before that, I was on the keto diet for about 6 months. And so also I have kids that are on the carnivore diet as well. Basically, our whole family is carnivore. And I am a scientist. I'm the chief scientist at a tech company. We make computer chips for AI. I've been a scientist my whole life, largely in physics and computer science. I do have a degree in biochemistry as well. But so I have a broad scientific background, and given that carnivore has healed many of my own personal health problems, I was fascinated, also by some of the stories that you feature on your channel and Dave Mack's channel of all the people healing their bodies with this meat-based diet. And so I dove into basically trying to understand the theory of disease and why is it that carnivore heals so many problems. So yeah, that's just a basic introduction to myself and my background. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we did an interview a few weeks ago, but before we go into that, Lydia, for anyone that doesn't know you, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Lydia. I've been sort of carnivore just under 3 years, and I'm very interested in Patrick's take on having his children go carnivore. We've got 2 children, and trying to steer them in that direction. But yeah, we hosted a successful meetup in December and in July. So we're with Cole trying to build community in the carnivore space. Live on a farm. And yeah, I attach a lot of data things to myself to see what works, what doesn't. So I've had a CKM on, a CGM on, and I love data because I think that's what, you get your answers from. So that's where I'm sort of in the metabolic space like that.
Yeah, you do a regular update, and you're doing one at the moment, and you keep making the point not one number's the answer. It's getting that whole holistic picture. So I do follow, Lydia. I do follow.
Good.
Right. So Patrick, obviously we did a recording a few weeks back, which has been quite popular on my channel anyhow. You have a theory that kind of, I wouldn't say turns it on its head, but is a different angle in regards to cancer and cancer tumours, really, but around toxicity. Do you want to sort of go into sort of a brief summary of that, and then we can have a further chat about it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a broader underlying philosophy behind my theory, which is that our bodies are actually brilliant and amazing and strategic with how they defend themselves. And I think that this philosophy has really guided my thinking. And in contrast, mainstream medicine will typically paint our bodies in the opposite way. They will typically say that our bodies are faulty and broken, our bodies attack themselves, and our bodies have malignant tissue. And our bodies are dumb and they have to be fixed by pharmaceutical drugs. And so, I would just put that as kind of like the underlying philosophy behind my theory. And the other aspect of this theory is that our bodies are exposed to a lot of toxins nowadays. And it is true that the number of toxins and the amount of toxins that we're exposed to seems to have increased dramatically over the past century. And sure enough, so has chronic disease, right? So it does match the timeline where toxins have gone up and chronic disease has gone up. And so I have tried to formulate a theory of disease based on toxicity. And there's, of course, a lot of things that we don't even realize are toxins that are actually toxins, and we can dive into that. But I wanted to understand also, why does carnivore diet heal the body so well? And, when I did go on carnivore diet, I did have oxalate dumping. So that made me aware of oxalates as a toxin. And I have Sally Norton's book right behind me, Toxic Superfoods on Oxalates. And so that was one obvious toxin that carnivore cuts out was, oxalates and all the plant defense chemicals. But also seed oils are another toxin the carnivore diet cuts out. There's, believe it or not, a lot of toxic metals are cut out. Heavy metals are cut out by the carnivore diet. Those are high in plant-based foods. There's also a toxin called deuterium that's largely cut out by the carnivore diet. But one thing that people don't really appreciate is that, believe it or not, even sugar, glucose and fructose, can actually be viewed as toxins. And of course, carnivores cut those out as well. And so there's kind of a long list of not just individual toxins, but entire classes of toxins. Like plant toxins are like 1,000 different toxins. Toxic metals, so there's like probably 20 different toxic metals. And so there's whole huge classes of toxins that the carnivore diet cuts out. And given that we have seen so many success stories on the carnivore diet, I thought, well, maybe this is the reason. Maybe it's really just the fact that carnivore diet is a low toxin diet, and that is why it's working so well. And so I dove in a little bit further into kind of the mechanism of how toxins manifest their toxicity. And it turns out there's a unified theory of toxicity whereby all toxins create what's called oxidative damage to the body. Oxidative damage to the body's tissues. They basically burn the body from the inside out. So if you imagine holding your hand over a flame, then that will burn your body from the outside in. But toxins actually burn you from the inside out. So they actually oxidize your body's tissues. And the underlying molecular mechanism is something called ROS, or reactive oxygen species. I realize that's kind of technical, but basically there are these small reactive oxygen containing molecules. And the reason why it's useful to state that is because it allows you to figure out what is a toxin and what's not a toxin. So if you go on the internet and you just ask, like, does cholesterol create oxidative damage to the body via these ROS chemicals, the answer you'll get is no. So that's good. So cholesterol is not a toxin. But then if you go on the internet and ask, like, does glucose and fructose, the sugars, do they create oxidative damage to the body's tissues via ROS? The answer is yes. And so in excess, of course. So this is a useful term for people to learn, which is ROS, reactive oxygen species, because it allows you to basically do an internet search to find out whether the chemical you're interested in is a toxin or not. And that allows us to kind of resolve debates, because, of course, there's a lot of debates. Nowadays, people ask, like, oh, are carbs good for you? Are carbs bad for you? There's so many debates nowadays. Seed oils, are seed oils good for you? Or seed oils bad for you? And we can just, like, one shot answer these questions immediately by saying, okay, seed oils, they create ROS, they oxidize the body's tissues, so seed oils are toxins. So we can just resolve that debate immediately. Anyway, so that kind of wraps up what I would call the theory of disease, in the sense that there are things that are real diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autism, heart disease, kidney disease, Hashimoto's, MS. All of those are basically examples where the body is exposed to toxins. The toxins will oxidize a particular part of the body, a particular organ, and then you give the disease a different name when the oxidative damage occurs to a different organ. When it occurs to the thyroid, it's called Hashimoto's. When it occurs in the brain, it's called Alzheimer's. When it occurs in the arteries, it's called cardiovascular disease. But that's kind of a unified theory of disease based on toxins. And right. I'm not the first person to point this out. There's been other people like Thomas Levy, who wrote a book called The Only Cause of Disease. And Dr. Thomas Levy identifies this exact mechanism as the only cause of disease, what he calls. And so that kind of sets the stage now for understanding cancer, because you'll notice that in that list of diseases that I mentioned, I did not mention cancer. Right. And because cancer is what looks like the oddball in this story. That's what looks weird and different and unusual. All of the other things that I mentioned, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, heart disease, kidney disease, those are cases where the tissue is getting damaged and destroyed. But cancer is a case where the body actually builds new tissue. It actually builds more tissue, a tumor, right? So, so this is not the case where tissue is being damaged and destroyed. It's actually a case where tissue is being built. New tissue is being built. And in this theory, toxin sequestration theory, it argues that basically anytime the body builds more tissue, new tissue, that's actually not a disease. It's actually a defense mechanism against toxins. It's actually the body building basically storage vaults to store toxins. And we can think of, in this theory, we can think of cancer cells as miniature storage vaults for toxins. And the body's key goal, the number one priority for the body, is to keep the toxins away from the vital organs, to protect the vital organs, protect the heart, protect the brain, protect the arteries, etc., from the toxic damage that toxins would cause if they were allowed to roam freely. And the analogy that I like to give is basically, in society, we don't allow criminals to roam freely because they would cause all sorts of damage to society if they were allowed to roam freely. So instead, we lock them up in a jail cell, in a prison, right? And so similarly, we can think of the toxins as the criminals. And the body doesn't want the criminals to roam freely throughout all the body fluids where they could cause all kinds of damage. Instead, it wants to create a jail cell to lock up those criminals. And that is how you can think of a cancer tumor, believe it or not. Yeah, go ahead.
So that's really interesting, right? And I can talk from a personal point of view. I had a melanoma removed from underneath my skin. They originally thought it was just bog standard skin cancer. It turned out it was quite nasty. So I put that down to being of Irish complexion, being out in the sun as a kid, getting sunburnt regularly, or doing great lobster impressions. And that's how I got the cancer. For what you're telling me then is whatever the toxins was in my skin, layer of skin, that obviously was turned into a tumor, wasn't something that was attacking me. It was the body pushing the problem into an area, is basically which becomes a tumor. Yeah, is that what you're basically saying?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And in the particular case of skin cancer, certainly seed oils play a big role. And it's well known that seed oils they're photosensitizers. They basically sensitize the skin to UV light. They integrate into cell membranes inside the skin, and you can view it as kind of like fuel for the fire, so that normally our bodies are not that sensitive to UV light. We can handle being outside in the sun. But if you eat a lot of seed oils, then that will basically provide fuel for the fire, so that then it'll enhance the damage of UV light in your skin. So naturally, your body's going to want to try to sequester those seed oils and keep them away from your healthy tissue. And so that would be one toxin that would contribute to skin cancer. But also a lot of heavy metals would also be associated with skin cancer. Normally, by the way, our moles are actually toxic metal vaults. And moles have a pigment called melanin in them. And melanin is a metal chelator. It actually chelates toxic metals. So it will chelate mercury, cadmium, lead, arsenic, excess copper, excess iron. And so like the sole purpose of moles is to like store toxic metals. And it's well known that moles are linked to skin cancer, right? They tell you to monitor your moles.
Yeah.
And basically they say, check your moles to see if they change in color or shape or whatever. And they never really explain, well, why are moles connected to skin cancer, right? Well, moles are toxin storage vaults. They store toxic metals, and so are cancer tumors. And if the body isn't satisfied with its miniature toxin storage vault, it might escalate to a more advanced toxin storage vault, which is a tumor, right? So in other words, a mole might not be enough given the amount of toxic load that you're exposed to. And it's also well known that we do excrete toxic metals via the sweat, and that sweat will stay on your skin, right? And so then you will get exposed to toxic metals just via the sweat that you sweat out, and that will be on the surface of your skin. So those are just two examples of toxins that would be connected to skin cancer. Yeah.
And that's really interesting, because I've been carnivore now just over 3 years. And in that time of being carnivore, I haven't got sunburnt once. And at the moment, the United Kingdom is under a heat wave, about the 5th heat wave this year. I've been out in the sun. I put no cream on, which first I was a bit nervous to do it, but I don't put cream on. My legs are slightly brown, but then I think I bleach in the sun, let alone get browner. But it's just unfortunately my skin. But I've noticed I've not got sunburnt once. Where 4 years ago, if I went out in the sun for 20 minutes, I was going pink. So I put that down to the lack of seed oils. I hadn't thought about the metal side of it, but it was just really, really interesting you said it, because I haven't been sunburnt once, and I'm out in shorts and all sorts. Lydia, do you want to go to the toilet?
No, this tan is seed oil free. But I have a question, Patrick. So, if somebody doesn't sweat, does that mean that they're not getting rid of the toxins? Because you can get many people who don't sweat. So is that they're not sweating out the toxins then?
There are more than one pathway that the body uses to excrete toxic metals. Urine, believe it or not, like our kidneys will basically concentrate toxic metals in the urine. So we pee out, pee out the toxic metals. But then also the liver will store some toxic metals, and those will get excreted via the bile, which goes into the intestines, which then gets out in the feces. So both the feces and the urine will be pathways to excrete toxic metals. And there's yet another pathway. It's clear that our bodies have a lot of ways to get rid of toxic metals, even our hair, which is fascinating, because if you do a hair tissue mineral analysis, then what you'll find is you'll see a whole bunch of toxic metals like aluminum, mercury, cadmium, lead, arsenic in the actual hair. And so I've actually interpreted hair growth as a detox pathway. And so, which is really interesting. And sure enough, our scalp hair is continuously growing in the background without us paying any attention to it, right? It's just always happening. And so you can actually think of that as the body kind of pushing those toxic metals farther and farther and farther away from the skull and the brain, right? So it's kind of detoxifying your head. And so there are at least those three. And also, I'll just mention one more minor pathway, which is also the toxic metals come out in your nails as well. And the reason is because both hair and nails have keratin in them. Hair also has melanin. So keratin and melanin are metal chelators. And and sure enough, when people do nail analysis, they also find heavy metals there as well. So you have, basically your urine, your feces, your hair growth, your nail growth, all four of those are pathways to get rid of toxic metals. Some of them are more kind of immediate and some of them are more long-term, because obviously hair and nail grows, they grow slowly. But the sweat is yet another pathway. So people can utilize sweating, of course, as yet another pathway to kind of relieve the pressure on the other pathways, right? So you can relieve the pressure on your kidneys and liver by sweating more. Yeah.
That's interesting, because that means Andrew Mountbatten must be more relieved now. Knows it's not just sweat he's got to get rid of the metals with. So it's a little in joke there about our former royal family members. Before we carry on, just go to some of the comments on here. So you mentioned about deuterium. We've got the fantastic Jonathan Carnivore Muscle in the audience. He's a regular on here, and he'll be coming on again soon in a few weeks' time. He puts in there about deuterium from animal foods is 135 or below parts per million or milliliter, which one it is, milliliters or whatever it is. And then plant food is 135 plus. It can go up to 200. And he's followed up with most ingredients that have an LD fifth of value, high part identifying direction, toxicity, spectrum that lays on. And then interesting, because you mentioned a book a minute ago. So we've just had DLE on, and in her second comment, which I'm trying to just get up, she says here, just figuring Nicholas use Sally K. Norton's Toxic Superfood book recommendation is a hot button. You actually, some of your studies based on that book. Is that correct, Patrick?
I'm a huge fan of Sally Norton's book. It's fantastic. I've read the whole thing and I highly recommend it to everyone. I think it was only like $12 on Amazon. So it's a super good buy. Everyone should get it. And it helped me a lot. As soon as I went on carnivore, which was basically 20 months ago, I immediately started oxalate dumping, immediately had kidney pain, immediately had painful urination, peeing out crystals. And it was crucial for me to understand what the heck was going on, because I was like, why is this happening? And then similarly with my son, who's 11 years old, he had crystals coming out of his eye. He had pain in his eye. So they do come out basically any way they can come out. And they also, oxalates get concentrated in the saliva. So you'll notice that when you're oxalate dumping, you'll get more dental tartar. And because the body basically deploys calcium to sequester the oxalates in the dental tartar. We can actually view the dental tartar as a defense mechanism against toxicity, just like cancer tumors, because it sequesters the oxalate. And anyway, we can go down the rabbit hole of oxalates, which is a fascinating rabbit hole to go down. But nevertheless, yeah, definitely check out Sally Norton's book. It's worth getting.
Right, brilliant. So, sorry, Lydia, you were going to follow up before I interrupted you with comments from the audience.
Oh no, it was the sweat one I was quite interested in. But also, so if going back to the cancer, so if it is like a gel and it's growing, that's obviously usually a really bad sign. So if someone's got cancer and their tumor's growing, that surely is not a good thing, or because of the toxicity? So I don't.
No, it's a great question. And naturally, we have to think about the language, of course, that mainstream medicine uses here, and how it's very different from the perspective of this theory, because in mainstream medicine, they'll classify tumors as malignant or benign. They'll say this is an aggressive tumor. They'll even give stages: stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. And from this theory's angle, a lot of that language can be unhelpful and misleading. And because, at least from this theory's perspective, all tumors are benign, and they all serve an actual purpose to sequester and store sequester and store toxins. And so then why would a tumor be growing? And that's because the body basically needs more storage space because it has more toxic load to deal with. And that can either be because you're ingesting more toxins, or it can be because maybe your primary detox organs, your liver and your kidneys, are failing. It could be that they're damaged. So, and it is very common for people who have liver damage to get cancer tumors. So that can be like preceding. And in fact, in this theory, I actually sometimes call a tumor a backup liver. Sometimes I think of a tumor as a backup liver, especially late stage tumors where they're acting as like a primary detox organ. Early stage tumors might act more as just a pure storage vault, but late stage tumors might act not only to store toxins, but actually to detoxify them as well, like a full-blown detox organ. So anyway, I realize that a lot of this sounds kind of crazy and outlandish to think of it in this way, but we can dive into the medical literature or research that supports this view. There's a lot of evidence to say that cancer cells are packed full of toxins. I'll just give you a list of toxins that have been found at very high levels inside of cancer cells relative to normal cells. So microplastics, forever chemicals, which are the PFAS in the nonstick pans, asbestos, which is an industrial toxin, benzene, which is an industrial solvent, oxalates, which we just talked about, all the toxic metals, so all the heavy metals, aluminum, and then the seed oils, so all the seed oils. So all of those toxins, they basically looked inside of cancer cells, and they found all of those toxins that I just mentioned at high concentrations inside of cancer cells relative to normal cells.
So based on what you're saying there, that's the body trying to tidy up the issue, right? Are you, and I've got to be very careful here, this is not medical advice, anything, this is your research and your opinion, etc. on it. Are we treating cancer tumours wrongly then by doing the treatment that they currently do? Or are you saying that if it was left alone, the body would sort it out? Or because you're constantly increasing toxins, that's just going to make the tumour bigger and more risky for the body? Or should we be doing a different type of treatment, like low carb or whatever it is? So I'm just interested in your point of view on that.
It is fascinating that when people get a cancer diagnosis, they often go down one of two paths. And there's the sort of standard mainstream path, which actually involves increasing the toxic load. It involves adding more toxins to the body. That would be chemotherapy, radiation, and sometimes there's like alternative treatments like ivermectin and things like that. But in any case, that is kind of a path that people often go down. That's the standard path. And then there's this other path, which is actually doing the exact opposite, which is lowering your toxic load, especially focusing on diet with things like ketogenic diets or carnivore diets. And it's really interesting that, for example, Thomas Seyfried has had success treating people with ketogenic diets, which in my theory would be a low toxin diet, largely because the keto diet cuts out glucose and fructose, which are toxins in my theory. It also cuts out, and I think Jonathan mentioned deuterium. So deuterium, which is low on the keto diet. And it's also low in seed oils, right? Because most people don't eat seed oils on the keto diet. So there's like several toxins that the keto diet cuts out. And in fact, carnivore cuts out even more than keto. So just to sort of contrast my view there with Seyfried's view, I'm not saying that the magic is in ketosis. I'm saying the magic is in being low toxin, and that a carnivore diet would be potentially even better than a keto diet because it actually cuts out even more toxins. So, but just to your question, it is worth noting that these two approaches are kind of exact opposite ends of the spectrum, right? So there's the chemotherapy, the radiation, and that strategy is actually to increase your toxic load in order to kill the cancer cells. So because cancer cells are packed full of toxins, and that's their job, is to store toxins. So if you just add more toxins to the mix, you will push them over the edge, and they will basically burst the apoptosis and die, because they can only handle so much toxicity before they just die. And so naturally, cancer cells are vulnerable to toxins, as are normal cells, but cancer cells are even more vulnerable than normal cells. So that is the strategy of chemotherapy and radiation, is to add more toxicity to the mix, to basically push cancer cells over the edge so that they will die. And that works in the sense that it does shrink cancer tumors. However, it does so in an unnatural way, by actually killing them. And sure enough, it is very common for people to get rebound tumors after doing these mainstream treatments. And from the perspective of my theory, we can understand that very simply in the sense that if you have tons of toxins stored in a storage vault, and then you add this chemotherapy to the mix, then basically the chemotherapy will burst open that tumor and release all the toxins. And then those toxins are like, it's like a jailbreak, right? Remember how we're thinking about it as like a jail? So now you're releasing the criminals can roam freely, and the body is now scrambling to basically build a new tumor in order to sequester those toxins and store them up. And so that's why we can understand why chemotherapy can lead to rebound tumors. And sometimes those rebound tumors are even more aggressive than the original tumors, because now the body has even more toxicity than it had before. It had the original toxins, plus now it has the chemotoxins. But then there's this other direction, like I said, of trying to lower the toxic load with a keto diet or a carnivore diet, just keeping things very simple, trying to live a low toxin lifestyle, eat a low toxin diet. And that also can, believe it or not, reduce tumor size as well through a phenomenon called spontaneous tumor regression. That is what I would call a natural way of reducing your tumor size. There, you're not actually attacking the tumor. You're actually just reducing the need for a tumor. You're just saying, well, if the body builds a tumor as a toxin storage vault, and then you remove the source of toxins, namely like you get on a low toxin diet, then the body doesn't need a toxin storage vault anymore. And then it can just dismantle and decommission its toxin storage vault. And that's what we would call spontaneous tumor regression. And that phenomenon has been shown in the medical literature. They basically found hundreds of case studies where people opted out of conventional medical treatment after they got a cancer diagnosis. And instead, they went on a low toxin diet and a low toxin lifestyle. And after some time, of course, they found that those patients witnessed their tumors either shrinking or fully disappearing. And there's hundreds of case studies of those in the medical literature. Yeah.
That's really interesting, because before I did the interview with you, a couple of weeks before that, I did an interview with a lady called Zoe Evans. And she's got her own channel on Instagram and that called Uncancered. and she found out she had they told it was stage 4, but it turned out to be stage 3C. I don't fully understand the grading, but stage 3, she was told to have chemo, but she found out she only had something like a 10% chance of success because how far it was gone through chemo. So she rejected it, and she did exactly what you said. She went very keto, almost carnivore, even lion at some point, and she's now completely clear of cancer for X number of years. And I mean, don't take my word for it. I think she's called Uncancered or something. Is her channel on Instagram and Facebook and whatever. And she has and it's the videos on my stack in the Primal Lifestyle. I've also done interviews with a guy who's got stage 4 GIST cancer, which is a form of stomach cancer. And he's got that in remission and it's shrinking. And he does all the crazy stuff as well. Anthony Haydock's his name.
Oh yeah. I know him.
I think you know Anthony, yeah. So I've done interviews with Anthony. I've done George down in New Zealand, who's got brain cancer, has been on carnivore for the last 18 months, and again seems to have stopped the development. He's not got rid of the cancer, but it's currently in that sort of balance at the moment. So I'm not. That's a very small number of people, and we've got Stephanie that both Lydia and I know quite well, who's had a mixture of treatment and doing the chemo diet, the carnivore diet, and has got a level of great success. So I think there is something in what you're saying there, Patrick. I'm not sure if I'm qualified enough to sort of verify it, but I'm just going to jump to the comments in the audience. So we've got Lamsey saying, "Oh, awesome seeing Patrick and Carl live." Oh, say cool. Sorry, Lydia. We like seeing you too, Lydia. Don't worry.
That's all right.
Jonathan's put in here, tumors are simply calluses for damaged cells. So it's basically what you've been saying here, Patrick. What's this? So we've just got some love coming in. Fantastic. Root cause of healing needed, plus light therapy will change cancer therapy. I don't know what your view on light side of it is, Patrick. I know that Lydia's quite into that and believe on that. I'm still sitting on the fence on that. Although having seen when we did our recent meetup, we had a fantastic group of people, and there was a lot of talk about light, and it's really kind of opened my eyes with regards to that. So Jonathan, he agrees with you, Patrick. So I'm just trying to catch up with a number of comments because it's conscious that we have an audience. And anyone want to ask a question, feel free. But if you put a Q in front of it, it would be easier for me to identify. Patrick, since I've been carnivore for years and have removed all cleaning supplies, insecticides, etc., I bought our first Demoster's water system. I have been on a targeted therapy for 10 years. Okay, that's very cool. Oh, there's a follow-up comment. I'm weaning myself off this therapy. How long in your TST will it take for me to be no longer be a acacia patient? Do you want to answer that question, Patrick, in your theory?
Yeah, it's a great question. And naturally, the body, I think, has its first priorities when it comes to healing from toxicity. And I think its number one first priority are to heal its primary detox organs. So there's, as I said, it's very common for people who have cancer to also have damage to their liver or their kidneys. And so if you say go from a standard diet to a low toxin diet like carnivore, then I think the body's first priorities are probably heal the primary detox organs, heal the liver, heal the kidneys. And once it does that, then it will have less of a need for a backup detox organ, which would be the tumor. And so it can take time to get rid of, in particular, oxalates, heavy metals, other toxic metals, and seed oils. It's well known that it can take a couple years, depending on how aggressive you are with your detox, to get the oxalates out, the heavy metals out, and the seed oils out. I think people usually associate it with 2 to 3 years. I'll just give another example, which is that Forever Chemicals, PFAS, they state basically 3 years roughly as the half-life for forever chemicals in the body. So if you have forever chemicals in your body, then it takes like 3 years to get those out. Now, of course, carnivore diet doesn't necessarily cut out forever chemicals, but water filtering can cut out forever chemicals if you filter your water. And of course, getting the appropriate cookware and things like that. But so you want to take this multi-pronged approach where I think diet is at the center, right? So diet's kind of number one, which is getting on the lowest toxic diet you can get. And that appears to be kind of like a ruminant, muscle meat focused carnivore diet. If you can get on that diet, which is almost like a lion diet, basically, right? So basically like a ruminant muscle meat focused carnivore diet appears to be the lowest toxin diet. Then that cuts out like massive numbers of toxins, thousands of toxins if you get on that diet. And then, so that's like number one. And then number two, after that would be getting really super clean water, which is, getting the best water filter money can buy for yourself. You can even think about shower, because we get exposed to toxins in the shower water as well. It's not easy to find a good shower filter, I will admit that. And because of that, I just point out that I don't shower that often. I only shower like once a week or something. And that's just because it's hard to find a good shower filter. So water is like number two. And then after that, of course, would be things like air quality, making sure that you're breathing in good air. You're not being exposed to industrial pollution via the air that you breathe. Obviously, you can get a good air filter. And then, of course, you want to avoid other sources of toxins, that people might be exposed to. There may be, for example, toxic metals in vaccines. So you want to be mindful of that. But yeah, so I guess I just wanted to say that it can take a couple years, I would say, to really detox. And I'm not necessarily like, the world's expert on detox. There are amazing experts out there on how to get the toxins actually out of your body. In other words, how to accelerate the process. There's people like Garrett Smith. He has a Love Your Liver program. Check out his Love Your Liver program, just for Audrey's benefit. And he has protocols to accelerate the detox process, to make it go faster, with things like binders, like activated charcoal, and certain mineral supplements like zinc, magnesium, molybdenum. And those minerals can kick out toxic metals, and the binders can then kind of like bind to the toxins and help them be excreted in the gut. So yeah, there are ways to try to accelerate it with these protocols.
Okay, well, obviously your TSTS is weirdly exciting, rooting for it to be widely accepted as a legitimate hypothesis and a study throughout. That's from Mr. Beaumont 666, which is concerning, really, because Mr. Beaumont's a good name, but 666 is the number of the beast, I believe, is it not?
I have a question.
Thank you for the cheering on. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I went to her name just gone right out of my head now. Can't think of her name. Went to her workshop and we got this as a detox that you can buy. Is that something you're aware of, that you know about this product?
MSM. I have heard of that. I've heard of some people in the oxalate community talking about MSM, some people in like the toxic metal community. I personally haven't used it, so I can't really say much about it. So I don't know. But if other people have stories, like, I don't know, have you found success with that?
I've been taking it probably for a couple of months, but I had a hair mineral test done, and my minerals, there was quite a lot of low minerals, but I was cabin crew for 14 years, and I thought my heavy metals were going to be a lot worse than they actually were. But yeah, still have them. Everyone has them, doesn't they? But it's just obviously how you get rid of them. But yeah, I wondered if you'd had any experience with that one.
Yeah.
Right. So got a couple of questions in. So this one here is: does tumour suck up glucose? If yes, does the tumour use glucose as a source of energy? Which is what the general conversation is that carbohydrates turn to sugars, and sugars is what feeds cancer. Would you say glucose helps the tumour to be more effective?
Yeah, should I answer that? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, great. So, and this really highlights kind of the different views between the metabolic theory and my theory of cancer, because in the metabolic theory, glucose is viewed as a key fuel source for cancer growth. And sure enough, it's absolutely true that cancer cells love glucose in the sense that they dramatically upregulate their glucose transporters in order to pull in glucose. This is the basis of PET scans. So whenever you get a PET scan, they give you some glucose analog, and then they trace it to wherever it goes, and it goes straight to the cancer tumor. And this is a way to kind of image tumors in that way. So that's like rock solid. Cancer tumors do love glucose, and they upregulate their glucose transporters to pull it in. The really interesting question is why? Why do they do that? Why do they love glucose? And that's where my theory kind of flips the script and interprets glucose as just yet another toxin that must be detoxified and must be sequestered by the body. It's just like oxalates. It's just like heavy metals. It's just like forever chemicals and microplastics. All of those are toxins, and glucose itself, we can understand as a toxin, of course, when in excess. Like obviously at very low concentrations, it plays a physiological role. But in today's modern diet, where people are drinking sodas every day and eating candy bars, many people have glucose overload, and that is not an ancestrally relevant level of glucose to have in your body. And the way to understand that glucose can be a toxin is that people who do have chronically elevated blood sugar, diabetics, for example, often have tissue damage. They have damage to their organs. They have to get limbs amputated. They have retinal damage, kidney damage, arterial damage to their peripheral nerves. And that is a direct manifestation of sugar's toxicity. When I say something is a toxin, I mean that it literally damages the tissues and organs. It actually destroys organs. And so, and sure enough, sugar does that. That is what happens with diabetics. Now, of course, that's the extreme case where someone has, chronically elevated blood sugar. And so if you just eat like a piece of fruit once a month or something, you're not going to necessarily see that. But nevertheless, many people, like I said, are drinking sodas every single day. So, and so we can reinterpret why cancer loves sugar as the fact that basically cancer is trying to prevent hyperglycemia, which is high blood sugar. It is working really hard to prevent hyperglycemia, and which would cause tissue and organ damage to your body. And so it's pulling the sugar out of your bloodstream. It's literally lowering your blood sugar. Cancer tumors actually lower your blood sugar by pulling the sugar out of the bloodstream and then pulling it in and detoxifying it in a safe and precautionary way, a safe and careful way. It's actually also why they switch their metabolism, is because if they use the standard metabolism to metabolize glucose, they would produce too much oxidative damage to the body's tissues. So they have to switch their metabolism of glucose so that they do it carefully. That's called the Warburg effect. Anyway, so this flips the script, and it says that cancer cells don't love sugar. They're just team players, and they work really hard to pull the sugar out of the bloodstream so that you don't have hyperglycemia and so that you don't get tissue and organ damage.
So it's your body pushing it to the tumor to try and box it off, basically. Then.
Exactly, yeah.
So Lamsey says here, Patrick's toxic. I could put me TST. TST, make life easier. It's the most groundbreaking one encouraged, and finally it makes all sense. His Substack is a world of knowledge and insight. I will. Obviously, we're live now, but I will post links to your stuff in the one that gets uploaded after the recording. So I'll let people.
Thank you, Lance. Thank you so much, Lance. Yeah,
no problem. Got a question here for you. Can tumors also be built up of parasites? My partner's hair analysis and bioanalysis showed a high parasitic liver blood flukes. Sorry, I think I need my eyes tested. Flukes and high. Oh, what are you lot trying to take the piss out of me? I'm a dyslexic, and you're giving me all these crappy words. So that's my personal joke with you lot. Anyhow, so now, Patrick, over to you.
Yeah, it's a great question. There is a theory of cancer called the parasite theory of cancer, where people have postulated that cancer tumors result from basically parasitic invasions into normal cells, where parasites kind of take over a cell. And that is the basis of some people using antiparasitics to treat cancer, like ivermectin. And so that is a different theory of cancer. I personally don't think it's right. I think it's actually not correct. And, once again, it feels like yet another attempt of big pharma to try to get people to take pharmaceuticals because, half the population will be suspicious of chemotherapy, and the other half of the population will take chemotherapy. For the population that's suspicious of chemotherapy, they basically marketed these repurposed pharmaceuticals like ivermectin and fenben, which are, just keeping people in the pharmaceutical system, instead of going back to our ancestral way of life, which was just eating like a carnivore animal-based diet. So I am very suspicious of anything that gets us back into big pharma system. But in any case, there's a very unconventional view. I'm going to get in trouble for presenting too many unconventional ideas. But nevertheless, even parasites, believe it or not, can play a protective role to the body. And people will, basically ridicule me for saying this, but there is evidence suggesting that parasites actually also sequester and store toxins as well, just like cancer cells. And I'm not the first person to say this. There's people online like Liev Dalton has a whole channel on this. People basically, and I found it fascinating when I heard this guy, Liev Dalton, give a talk saying that parasites were sequestering and storing toxins to protect the body. And I was like, wait, that's exactly what cancer cells do. So that was really interesting. And it's also consistent with the fact that it looks like anything that's good for us is demonized by mainstream media and mainstream medicine. And so they've demonized the parasites and they've demonized the cancer cells. And so it's all kind of consistent there. But with that said, I personally have not dove deep into the parasite topic. So I'm not going to tell you that I definitively know for sure that parasites definitely are good for us or something like that. I've dove much deeper into cancer, but there's enough voices out there saying that maybe parasites might actually play a detox role that I'm, wondering whether that might be true. So I'll just say that, yeah.
Right. Okay. So just to for balance and that, there's two comments I'm going to flash up here. Phil HX is saying, I'm not sure that TSS is believable if you haven't experienced the effects of carnivore first, but then someone has then responded. No, sorry, wrong one. Where is it? Where are we? Oh no, it's the right one. Yeah, I think you're right, Phil. It sounds too good to be true unless you experience it, which is most times pretty late in stages of disease. And that's what happened to me. I was morbidly obese. I had obviously cancer. They wanted me to go on statins. They wanted me to start taking treatment for diabetes and all the various blood pressure tablets, all that. By chance or by luck or judgment, I didn't want to do that. Discovered Jordan Peterson's talk with Joe Rogan, decided to go carnivore, and the rest is history for me. So I was at late stages. I even got out of my businesses, sold my businesses to address my health issues because it was leading me to, I turned 60 last week and I was told 3-4 years ago, if I wanted to make 60, I needed to do some lifestyle changes. And thank God I got that advice and I acted upon it. So there's a couple of comments on this. So I just want to make sure that I'm being transparent and sharing all the comments. We've got here, I had a blood test 15 years ago that said I was developing cancer, did a liver detox, low carb, etc., normalized everything in a few years and was discharged without receiving treatment. So there's evidence there. I'm not saying it's, I can't say it's the solution, whatever, because it's, I'm not qualified to do so. But
that's great.
Someone's own experience there lines up with everything that you've been saying and with interviews that I've done with previous people. So I just think
that's a wonderful story, and congratulations, by the way. That's wonderful news.
Yeah, that is brilliant. I think that is absolutely brilliant.
And yeah,
I was only joking, Stevie Hayes. It's just I am dyslexic, and when unfortunately you get into this world and they start using the medical terms, it's just like a nightmare for me. But that's just me. So. Lydia, you've been very quiet. I've not allowed you to talk much tonight.
No, that's right. I just put because I didn't want because I wanted obviously people to if they're questioning on your channel. But so obviously prevention is always better than cure. So regarding especially women having cervical smears and mammograms, a lot of women get very frightened about having mammograms, etc., because of the radiation and things like that. Is that something that should be avoided, or is it all very positive to have all this? Checks done?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Of course, I'm not necessarily giving medical advice. All I can do is say,
Yep.
what does my theory predict, right? So I can
Yes.
say, if this theory is right, then this is what it says. And the theory basically says that the root cause of disease is oxidative damage from toxins. Now, radiation produces those ROS chemicals by ripping water molecules apart. So it actually does produce oxidative damage to the body's tissue. So you can actually think of radiation as just like chemical toxins in the sense that it does produce damage to the body. So anytime you're getting exposed to X-ray radiation or even other types of radiation as well, so like cell phone and Wi-Fi radiation also produce oxidative stress to the body. So anytime you're getting exposed to, say, X-rays with some kind of scan, like a dental X-ray, then you're producing damage to your body's tissues, and that is a driver of disease. So that you would want to avoid that basically. And so and then also that highlights a key problem with radiation therapy in treating cancer tumors. But also there are monitoring things that people do, things like biopsies, and that also you wonder, is that really good or not, right? Because
that's my next question.
right, because if you're doing a biopsy of a toxin storage vault, what are you doing, right? So you're basically you're bursting open the vault, you're breaking it open, you're hurting, you're breaking open cells, and so you're releasing toxins. So like I said, cancer cells store microplastics, forever chemicals, heavy metals, aluminum, oxalates, and seed oils. And imagine all those things now roaming freely. So and so yeah, a biopsy would spread, in this theory, they would spread toxins. And so it could actually cause the cancer to become more aggressive, because now it's like, oh my God, I have to clean up this toxic spill now, so I have to grow bigger. And that's why some people have talked about potentially biopsies actually spreading cancer, because in my view, of course, it's spreading the toxins, and the cancer has to clean up the mess. But yeah,
obviously where it would go elsewhere, because if you're opening up, jail break, and then it goes somewhere else, and obviously these cancer cells are going to move elsewhere in different organs of the body then.
Exactly. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Because that's interesting, because when they took my tumor away, my tumor was, I was opened up in the here, and it was taken out, which is great because it's taken all the toxin without doing a biopsy or anything like that beforehand. And I never had it. I didn't need any treatment because by then I was well on the journey of low carb carnivore diet. So the subsequent checkups that I've had have all shown perfectly clear, because I'm not adding back to that problem. So having a tumor removed is not a bad thing. What you're saying is invading the tumor to do a biopsy to test it could potentially, it's like punching a hole in a prison wall, using your analogy.
That's right. Yeah. And actually with tumor removal, they, statistically, they've done studies to see whether it's like leads to better or worse outcomes. And they find that, it leads to decent outcomes if you do it early stage, and especially in peripheral tissues like the skin, which is exactly what you did.
Yeah.
So, but if you do tumor removal in late stage, especially in things like, internal organs where the surgery is more invasive, that at that stage, the tumor might actually be your primary detox organ, because at that stage, your liver might be failing. And so they've actually found oftentimes worse outcomes from late stage tumor removal. And that's really hard to explain from mainstream medicine's view, right? Because if the tumor is truly the enemy, how do we explain that late stage removal leads to worse outcomes in some cases, right? It doesn't make sense. And so but the early stage makes a little bit more sense, because the tumor is not the primary detox organ. It's not so essential to the body. And it's really just like kind of like a localized contained vault. And you're scooping out the toxins and getting it out. So I can see why early stage removal leads to better outcomes, but it's interesting that the late stage doesn't. So yeah.
Sorry, go on, Lydia.
Sorry, if you had a late stage tumor, how would you get rid of that then? Obviously we're going that it should be your diet, but it's only going to get bigger, surely, or how do you?
It's a good question. And I really, I recognize that we've been trained to kind of think that the tumors are the enemy number one. But in my theory, toxins are enemy number one. And our whole goal when we wake up in the morning every day should be, how do I reduce my exposure to toxins? Because toxins are the root cause of every disease. And if you treat cancer with toxic chemicals like chemotherapy and radiation, those toxins can drive new diseases. You can actually give someone a new disease like diabetes, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, etc., by giving them the treatments. And so that's the scary thing. And so I do think that, in this theory, the correct path is to focus on the low toxin approach. And get on strict carnivore diet, filter your water, filter your air, do everything you can to try to reduce your toxicity. And, let the body do its thing in the background, right? The body's going to be building stuff, to try to protect itself. If we trust our bodies, if we view our bodies as brilliant and strategic and amazing, then it's like, well, we don't have to intervene with our body's, process. We just let the body do its thing. We do our job. Our job is to reduce the toxic load, and then the body will handle the rest. And the body can decommission its tumor when it's ready to do that. Is sort of the thought.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, so another question here from Mr. Beaumont 666 is, as TST centers around the body trying to protect itself, do you also believe that insulin resistance, which I've heard nothing but everywhere about insulin resistance now, it's the new thing everyone talks about, is the misnomer, and that it is simply the cell's defense mechanism against glucose toxicity? And I managed that. Wow.
Nice. So, this is a wonderful question. And, if you view the world conspiratorially, any term that goes viral is something that people are trying to trick us on. And it is worth noting that I think the only diet that's never gone viral is like the carnivore diet on social media. Every other diet has gone viral. The sugar diet has gone viral. The Mediterranean diet has gone viral. Carnivore is like the only diet that has not gone viral on social media. And now we're starting to see insulin resistance go sort of viral. And so what's going on there? Like, can we try to figure out why is it that we're hearing so much about this? And I've already talked about how sugar itself can be viewed as a toxin, both glucose and fructose. And especially for people who do have diabetes, they're going to have chronically elevated blood sugar. And there are cells that are especially vulnerable to glucotoxicity. Glucotoxicity is a fancy name for sugar's toxicity. But anyway, there's certain cells, like, for example, liver cells and muscle cells. Those cells are insulin sensitive cells, which means that if they basically rely on insulin to take in glucose. So we can actually view insulin resistance as those cells basically shutting their doors shut to glucose whenever they have too much. Because if they take in too much glucose, they will be damaged and destroyed. And of course, the body doesn't want to destroy your liver, right? It doesn't want to have a destroyed liver because it took in too much glucose. So we can actually view insulin resistance as a protective adaptation to excess blood sugar. And then, and sure enough, they found in the medical literature, when they did clinical trials of patients with diabetes, they found that in patients where they treated the insulin resistance, in other words, they tried to counteract it, either with high dose insulin or with pharmaceutical drugs, those patients had worse outcomes. They had more mortality, more death. So diabetics who were actually treated for their insulin resistance, in other words, they were either given high dose insulin or they were given drugs to suppress the insulin resistance, they had more death than untreated patients. And so this is once again an example of fighting the body's defense mechanisms, and that the body is brilliant, strategic, and amazing. Just like how chemotherapy fights cancer, high dose insulin and certain pharmaceuticals will fight insulin resistance, and those are fighting the body's defense mechanisms. And I think that it's fascinating that even within the keto carnivore space, there's still a lot of lack of consensus around this point. People have told me that Bart K actually has the same view as me on this. So kudos to Bart K, because I guess he and I agree on this. But nevertheless, there's other people. For example, there's a guy Ben Bickman, who's
Ben Bickman,
who's been talking a lot about insulin resistance. And I think it's just kind of confusing people, like, because in my theory, that's a protective adaptation to prevent the destruction of your liver, the destruction of your muscle cells and other cells that are insulin sensitive. And I give a simple analogy where it's like, imagine that you're in a house and there's a whole bunch of stray cats on the street. And you're like, oh, let me first be a good neighbor and take in a couple of stray cats. But then eventually your house is just full of cats. And you're like, I can't take any more cats in. And so I'm just going to close my door shut and lock it. And even if someone comes knocking at my door, so even if insulin comes knocking at my door, I'm not going to take in any more cats because otherwise it'll destroy me, right? So anyway, that's just a simple analogy for how you can understand insulin resistance.
But for me, my take with insulin resistance is our lifestyles now, with all the carbohydrates that we take in and the sugars we take in through the drinks, the foods, the hyper processed foods, where going back to our primal time, those products weren't there. We were eating animals and eggs and things like that. So it's the body being forced to produce insulin, just as you say, to avoid the toxicity, which if you keep doing it, eventually the body can't cope with the constant insulin peaks and all that. So I kind of get what you're saying, and I see where Ben Bickman comes from. So, I've got a fan. Thanks, Jonathan. My dyslexia is funny. I use it on my comedy stand-up quite regularly, or should I say my codedy. Right. This is a follow-up to the gentleman that managed to reverse his side. He said, I wasn't carnivore then, but pescatarian. Increase of fish, fasting, mimic, etc. with very, very keto blood test. So basically, he went low carb, and obviously got the sex. The doctors couldn't fathom it out, but it worked for him. So as you say, that's a brilliant success story on that front. Carnival Jonathan's mentioned here. Thanks for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you,
Patrick.
Jonathan.
Very well read individual. He's clearly not dyslexic. So that's my little win joke. Celia, oh Jesus Christ, Jonathan, you've set up great, and then you drop me right in this shit. Right. Celia Necrosis, is it? I don't know how you pronounce that particular word. Elevated order of me is active. So basically, I think he's just putting words in to confuse me. No, but seriously, do you agree with that, Jonathan?
Yeah. I think he's talking about like fasting. Like if you do fasting, for example, right? If you do fasting, it'll trigger autophagy, right? And so, actually, the autophagy is viewed as a good thing in this theory, right? So, because it is true that you're going to get a whole lot of oxidative damage to your body's tissues. Imagine just a whole bunch of damaged, dysfunctional molecules kind of accumulating in your body, all this damaged tissue, and your body wants to clean that up. And of course, autophagy is a way to do that. And it's just kind of like the cleanup crew coming in, sweeping up all the garbage. And this otherwise would be stuff that the cancer tumors would have to sequester and store. And so it actually relieves some of the pressure off the cancer tumors, because it's like, oh, well, I don't have to deal with all that garbage now because the autophagy kind of cleaned it up. And so it does help with encouraging this tumor regression idea because it relieves pressure on the tumors.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I get it, because if the body's not firefighting, as in dealing with toxins, it can then deal with the problem that it's isolated off and deal with it. So I kind of get that. So I've got one more comment here from. We'll be going over now. Are you happy to carry on, Patrick? Because I find this subject absolutely fascinating, and if you're happy to carry on, because we normally sort of wrap up.
Sure, that's fine.
Someone's asked about what happens once you clear a tumour in the cellular terrain is clear and the background noise and inflammation is reduced, the body can heal. So that's more of a comment rather than to do it. So Lydia mentioned it earlier on, because I'm quite interested as well, even though my children are all grown up in that. You mentioned you've got your children on carnivore, and Lydia's obviously got two young little darlings as well. Do you want to explain how you've got them onto that? Because that must be one of the hardest things for parents, with all the marketing and the society and the way that the McDonald's of this world and the Burger Kings and KFC and there's other crap food stores if you want to use them. Do you want to explain how you managed to achieve that goal?
Yeah, sure. We started in March 2024, so just 2 years ago. And then we went on the keto diet first. And that was actually the hardest part. Getting on keto was really the hardest thing, because you had to kick the carb addiction, right? So kicking the carb addiction, I think, was the hardest part of getting on the diet. And we bridged the gap. I'm not even sure that this is really a good thing, but we did bridge the gap with some, stevia and those kinds of things. Like we were following Eric Berg's kind of, ideas of using like the erythritol and stevia. And so we did that for a couple months. But in hindsight, I don't think those chemicals are good for you, by the way. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. So in any case, we managed to kick the sugar addiction. It took maybe, a month or two of gradually weaning off of that stuff. But getting rid of the vegetables was super easy because they didn't like that anyway. They actually hated the vegetables. And in fact, I was still when we were on the keto diet, I was still trying to give them weird stuff like turmeric. And they were like, I don't want to eat turmeric, and so, yeah, it was a relief, honestly, whenever we cut the vegetables out, frankly. So going from keto to carnivore was super easy, but kicking the carbs was the hard part. And, we did run into trouble with our school. Where are you based, Lydia? Are you based?
I'm in Kent, in England, and we have. I stopped my kids' school. I mean, my 11-year-old. He's left school now, but my daughters will be going into year 3, and I had terrible problems with food because she's really good at eating, and she'll eat sort of smoked mackerel, boiled eggs, which I'd give her to go to school in, and of course they're not the nicest smelling lunch. So she takes in jerky, she takes in numerous things that she will eat at home, but it's really frowned upon at the school, and I hate it because they've opened pork scratchings for her and gone like, oh, and all this, and I just sort of think, I hate that part of it. So my son's obviously leaving school, but I just struggle. We've kicked the UPS, we don't have anything like that in the house, but I still give them food that hasn't got it in, but they still feel like a treat because I don't want them to feel so dissociated from other children, and that's probably the bit that I struggle with. But I don't let them eat veg. I don't care if they don't eat it. I asked, we went shopping today and our cart was just nothing, no vegetables, nothing. People probably frown.
That's great. Yeah, we had a similar experience, to be honest. We had a trouble with our school system as well. I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico in the US, but we were in the public school system, and then we were actually forced to pull our kids out, to be honest, because the principal of the school, who's like the most powerful person, actually wrote up a report against us saying that we were, feeding our kids inappropriately by just putting meat in the food. Meanwhile, that same principal had a huge jar of candy bars on her desk in her office that she would actually hand out to kids, right? So anyway, so that's who I got lectured by. And so that was tough. You have to really find a supportive school, and there's probably supportive schools out there, but
my son's now out of school. I'm homeschooling him from September, but my daughter, I'll probably give her a year and then she'll be out, because it's, even when I contacted the school and I was like, what is the catering? And they were like, oh, it's vegetables, and we use rapeseed oil, and I'm like, oh my God, that's her out of school dinners. But it's the fact that they'll do experiments. Like, she'd come home the other day and said that they had a peach and spinach smoothie, and I was like, I don't want her eating that. Why would I? If I don't give it to her at home, why would I send her to school? And that bit really does frustrate me. But I had an interesting situation with my two children. So they had a bit of a free reign, which was sort of sausage rolls and things like that at a party. And that evening they were both sick, and they were like, oh, we can't go to school, we've been sick. And I was like, it's just your body. It's your body telling you that you've eaten such wrong food. It's repelled it. And then my son, for his leaving party, it was sort of picnic food, and I said to him, just go easy. That night, 11 o'clock, he was sick, and he woke up in the morning, he was like, why is there a sick bucket? And I was like, you were sick in the night. And he had no recollection at all of being sick. But to me, that was his body expelling food that he doesn't normally eat, and that part fascinates him. So now he's so good at reading packets if we do eat something out, and he knows exactly what he can and can't have because he knows how his body feels. But yeah, carnivore, they're not carnivore, but we're meat heavy, but I'd like them to be more. But it's just a bit of a battle.
kids are brilliant in respect of they've got no sort of filter to worry about. And I remember, and I'm sure most parents will is, when your kid's a baby, they don't like the vegetables.
No.
And it's almost ancestral, the reason why they don't like the vegetables, because they know it's not good for us, even though we tell them it is. You know, and when I look, and I was fortunate in my upcoming, my father used to fish. So, you know, I used to swap my pheasant sandwich for a sausage sandwich at school or a cheese sandwich, because we always joke that we live like paupers. No, we ate like kings and lived like paupers. But when I say my father wildfowl, I think some people call that poaching, but we won't go there. Right, so there's a couple of comments. There's a comment here, Lydia, for you. They used SMS, nucleic acid, butane, and times of detoxifying the liver. Found it very useful. So there's a positive bit of feedback. There's another question here for you, Patrick. Where do you stand with metabolic flexibility of cancer cells, switching fuel sources to fatty acids, amino acids, and lactate? These ain't seemingly toxic in neither. You know.
Yeah. I mean, well, you know, I just feel that, you know, and obviously I recognize that there are people who follow Thomas Seyfried's theory of cancer, which is a metabolic theory. But in my theory, really metabolism is not what cancer is all about. It's really not, it's kind of missing the picture. It's like calling a dog a tail wagging machine. Like do you really think that captures, it's true that a dog is a tail wagging machine, but does that really capture the essence of what a dog is? And I think similarly, whenever we focus on metabolism, we're kind of missing the big picture of what's going on with cancer. The big picture, in my view, is that a cancer tumor is a toxin storage vault. It's packed full of toxins, and that's its job. And then it turns out that to be a toxin storage vault, you have to change your metabolism. Because if you were to actually run the standard metabolism in the presence of tons of toxins, those toxins would generate tons of ROS, reactive oxygen species, which would generate tons of oxidative damage to the body's tissues. And that's what the body's trying to avoid in the first place. The whole point is to not get oxidative damage of the body's tissues and organs. And so in order to choose cells as toxin storage vaults, it has to change the metabolism inside of those cells. And that's why we get these metabolic changes, which is what Seyfried has observed. That's what we call the Warburg effect, like I said. And Stephanie Seneff, who is, by the way, the person who inspired my theory, she's an MIT senior researcher. She was the one who totally laid this out. And she said that, believe it or not, the mitochondria inside of cancer cells are actually fully functional. They're just downregulated, and they're not. Whereas in the other theory, in the metabolic theory, they basically view the mitochondria as damaged and broken. And in fact, Stephanie Seneff has argued in her research that they're not broken. They're actually just downregulated. And the cancer cell could actually reinstate them and use them if they wanted to. And so this highlights the fact that the change in the metabolism inside of cancer cells is a choice. It's not the result of, you know, the fact that the cancer cell is damaged. And yeah, and so I think that, you know, of course, really focusing on the metabolism of the cancer cell kind of really still presents it within this view of like, oh, how do we target it? How do we kill it? Right. And so like, and that's not really the goal here in my theory. And yeah, so I think that I just try not to focus on that. Because I mean, of course, other cells can be metabolically flexible as well. It is true that normal cells can be metabolically flexible, right? So like, you know, normal cells can be metabolically flexible, so can cancer cells.
Right. So there's a comment on here about the Randall cycle, cell carnivore. To me, no plants now except as drugs, treatments for short periods, only when nothing else is available, only when absolutely necessary, etc. I mean, my whole outlook on fruit and vegetables now has completely changed, and I'm still amazed that people that have known me over the last 3 years, that knew me when I was obese and unhealthy and all the issues, still can't get their head around that I don't eat vegetables and I don't eat fruits or salads and things like that. Now, I do have I class myself as a bit of a dirty carnivore. It was my birthday last week, so I had a couple of Guinnesses. I went off plan, as you would call it, for a couple of days. And like Lydia touched upon, I visited the toilet at 4 o'clock in the morning, and my body did its exit plan that way. And the next morning realised probably shouldn't have done that. But, it's life, isn't it? But I'm back on plan again now, and as I normally am around here. But interesting, the Randall cycle is a key element because, do you have anything to add to that, Patrick?
It's yet another protective adaptation that the body employs. So just like how I was talking about insulin resistance as a protective adaptation, Randall cycle is also another one. And I think the idea here is like what happens when you consume both fats and sugar at the same time. And so the body, basically, if the body would try to metabolize both of those at the same time, it could lead to the production of a lot of ROS chemicals and a lot of oxidative damage. So the body has to kind of protect itself from metabolizing both of those at the same time. And that's basically the Randall cycle, which is that it kind of prevents the simultaneous metabolism of both sugar and fats as a protective adaptation. There is also the fact that like seed oils are, this effect would be pronounced if the fats themselves are actually toxic. So sometimes you're consuming seed oils and sugar at the same time, right? Like there are cases if you're eating ultra processed foods, then you're eating both toxic fats and toxic sugar. And in that case, the body's like, oh shoot, now I have two big toxins that I have to detoxify. So I'm going to like do one at a time. So, and that's kind of like how Randall cycle would work here. It's like, okay, let me first maybe detoxify seed oils and then I'll do the sugar later or something, or vice versa. So it basically has to do things sequentially so it doesn't create too much damage. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And I would say just a quick appeal to anyone still online watching, please give it the thumbs up. It helps the algorithm. So when the live stream becomes a recorded version, it helps promote it and gets the message out to a wider audience. So if you can. Here's the young lady in question. Lydia's Mark II.
You can say hello, say wave.
So there was a comment here. So this is interesting because obviously Seafried is seen as the man about cancer as such, and obviously your viewpoint doesn't contradict it, but it takes a different view on certain elements. So the problem with Seafried is that reducing carbs but increases protein, glutamine would have gone up. So that makes no sense in my past experience according to Seafried. I mean, do you want to add anything to that, Patrick?
That's an excellent point that 100% agrees with my view. And I would just agree with that basically. And of course, I recognize that Seyfried is a pioneer. He's done amazing work. He was really the key person that highlighted the key role of diet, right? Like he was the guy that pointed out, we have to focus on diet. So I want to, deeply give gratitude to his pioneering work. It's just that, obviously I've tried to take it a step further and argue that this view that glutamine is a fuel source for cancer would emphasize the fact that animal meat would be bad for you, right? Like if we took that view that glutamine fuels cancer and cancer is a disease, then the natural logical conclusion is that you should not eat animal meat, right? Like you should actually avoid animal meat. And that's also in line with the mainstream propaganda, which is saying like meat causes cancer. How many times have we seen headlines in the mainstream media that meat causes cancer? So that view that glutamine is a fuel source for cancer supports the mainstream view. And I'm trying to get away from the mainstream view. But anyway, so in this theory, we're instead viewing not glutamine as a toxin, but glutamine as a carrier of a toxin. There's a particular toxin called ammonia it's found in cleaning products, and it's also naturally produced in your muscle cells, but the body can't transport it in the blood. It can't just dump ammonia into the blood because it'll damage the arteries. And so it has to stick it to an amino acid called glutamine, and then the glutamine carries it from the muscle cells to the detox organ. Normally the detox organ would be the liver, but if you have liver damage, the detox organ is now the cancer tumor. And so this can explain, at least in my view, why cancer cells love glutamine. It's not that they really love glutamine. It's that they're actually trying to pull in the glutamine so that they can rip off the ammonia and detoxify it as a team player because they are a detox organ. So in that sense, my theory kind of gives, hope to people who like eating animal meat, and because it's saying that actually glutamine is perfectly fine.
But it was interesting because today I saw on social media Richard Smith, the Keto Pro, did a post. I can't remember if it was Instagram or whatever it was, but he showed about the studies that the World Trade was saying about red meat causes cancer. And then he analysed the 800 studies, of which only, I think, 36 of them were actually used. And 20 of those 36 actually said it didn't. And then it was completely twisting the findings to create a theory about it. And he was able to prove through his social media posts that it was complete and utter, pardon my language, bollocks. And I kind of agree with that. So, right, we'll make this the last question because we've been going an hour and 20, and this is the longest one we've done live stream, but I think it's been one of the most fascinating for me anyhow. So the follow-up question is, do you think that the metabolic switch away from glucose is one of the steps towards the tumour's, what's it? I was about to say attention there, adulation. Add to 10, oh, fucking bollocks.
Attenuation.
Thank you. I ain't got the tea for this.
Yeah. So the metabolic switch away from glucose is one of the steps towards the tumor's attenuation. Not sure exactly what the question is getting at. Again, in this theory, we're focusing more on the toxicity and the detoxing rather than the metabolism. So it's really about, how much toxins do you have circulating in your bloodstream, in your body fluids, and that is what requires a tumor, right? Like as the toxicity goes down, then the tumor can attenuate because it's not needed anymore. So, yeah, I mean, I think that sugar is, like I said, just think of it as very similar to microplastics and forever chemicals. It's just yet another toxin and just yet another thing the body doesn't want roaming around the bloodstream. So I would just say, yeah, by reducing sugar. So I think this helps to explain, at least in my theory, why ketogenic diets have been working so well to treat cancer, because you're just reducing the amount of sugar as well as other toxins, and then you're reducing the need for a detox organ to pull that out of the bloodstream. Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. Right. So we've got the last comment and then we're going to wrap up. So, and Lydia, unless you want to add anything to that. Do you fully answered everything for Lydia? It's a different point of view, isn't it? It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fascinating because you can. Yeah, I can see both sides, but obviously because we're having a conversation now, I'm on this fence.
Yeah. Right, so I'm going to wrap up now. Thank you, Patrick. This has been really enlightening. If you're available, I'd like to get you on in a few weeks' time or whatever, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interest from this subject, and I think it's an area we should continue to explore. Absolutely agree with you, Audrey. Absolutely agree. I think this is one of the best ones. No disrespect to anyone else who's been on previous ones. Don't want to take offence. But I just think this was a subject matter that was really interesting and intriguing. So thank you, everyone, for attending. I'm now going to kill the live stream.
Thank you.
So there's another quick comment there. I'm going to kill the live stream. And if you stay on board, Patrick,